Our Revolutionary War were British people fighting their British government because the British government was denying them the rights that had been secured to all Englishmen for over 700 years. And knowing that, we must ask the question then, if all they knew were kingdoms, why didn't they just do it again? How many of you remember from your history lesson that shortly after our biggest victories with Great Britain, there were people begging George Washington to be king? Yep. I mean, we were that close to picking that piece of history up again and trying to replay it. But we should be thankful that there were some of our framers that said, whoa, we've been doing the kingdom thing for the last 700 years and it hasn't worked out so well for us. You see, kings only keep their promises as long as you hold a sword at their throat. Yep. The minute you drop the sword, kings go back to being kings and people go back to being subjects. How about we don't do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results? You see, our framers had a singular focus. They had different ideas on how to achieve that, but they were singularly focused on one thing: liberty.
But I want to ask Krisanne, because I know you've been silent, you wanted to get back into this debate. The original question that came up earlier from our gentleman originally from Cuba, he's concerned about how far this can go. Are the issues, let's keep it in terms of additional gun laws. Is it an incremental step to the loss of all gun privileges? Is that a concern? Should people be concerned, or is it really not an issue?
Well, it is really an issue. The term in the Second Amendment is "shall not be infringed," because the framers of our nation knew their history, and we all know those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat its mistakes, and we're dooming ourselves to repeat the mistakes of our history. You know, I find it ironic that the argument on the other side of the table is that we have this fear of government and we're built all on fear of this and fear of that. And yet the entire impetus for this Gun Control Act has to do that we have to save our babies. You see, the emotional argument is still there the same. And I also find it ironic that the other side of the table wants to increase laws in order to create a more orderly society when they can't even follow the rules of the debate and wait until they're called upon. So if rules keep law in order for law-abiding citizens, then we should be having no problem having a reasonable discussion about what's going on here. Now, history, as this man has lived through history, proves that the tendency of a central government is to become tyrannical, which is why our Constitution created the federal government in a limited and defined capacity. George Mason said that when the resolution of enslaving America was formed in Great Britain, the British Parliament was advised by an artful man who was governor of Pennsylvania to disarm the people, that it was the best and most effectual way to enslave them, but they should not do it openly but weaken them and let them sink gradually. That's precisely why the Second Amendment says shall not be infringed, so you cannot be weakened and sink gradually. Now, you had asked, where are the evidences of an overreaching federal government? And I saw the mention of the fact that the Department of Justice has said that they believe that the President of the United States is authorized in ordering the killing of U.S. citizens on U.S. soil by drones. That is not a lie. That is an actual written statement by Eric Holder from the Department of Justice, and you can go read it. You can actually read the Department of Justice white paper, which says that the Department of Justice has rationalized in some quasi-legal 16-page paper that they not only have the ability to assassinate U.S. citizens anywhere on the globe, they have the ability to do that, and in their very own words, without any evidence whatsoever, and that they can do that, and the courts have no jurisdiction to tell them they can't. So if the federal government can assassinate its own citizens with no evidence, these are not my words, go read the paper yourself. and they can do it
terrorists, by the way,
anywhere,
the people they assassinate is called
then
terrorists.
what are you going to do? And the assault and the assassination doesn't have to be on the battlefield. These are people that are completely removed and engaged in no activity whatsoever. So if you have a federal government who thinks that they can do that sometime in the future, what will be the limitation of them doing that to you tomorrow?
The Council is now ready to proceed to the vote on the draft resolution before it. The result of the voting is as follows: 14 votes in favor, 1 vote against. The draft resolution has not been adopted owing to the negative vote of a permanent member of the Council. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have been the proud representative of the United States at the United Nations for nearly a year now. This is the first time I have exercised the American right to veto a resolution in the Security Council. The exercise of the veto is not something the United States does often. We have not done it in more than 6 years. We do it with no joy, but we do it with no reluctance. The fact that this veto is being done in defense of American sovereignty and in defense of America's role in the Middle East peace process is not a source of embarrassment for us. It should be an embarrassment to the remainder of the Security Council. It is highly regrettable that some are trying to distort the President's position to serve their own agendas. What is troublesome to some people is not that the United States has harmed the peace process. We have, in fact, done no such thing. Rather, what is troublesome to some people is that the United States had the courage and honesty to recognize a fundamental reality. Jerusalem has been the political, cultural, and spiritual homeland of the Jewish people for thousands of years. They have had no other capital city. But the United States' recognition of the obvious, that Jerusalem is the capital and seat of the modern Israeli government, is too much for some. First, some have threatened violence on the street, as if violence would somehow improve the prospects of peace. Now today, buried in diplomatic jargon, some presume to tell America where to put our embassy. The United States will not be told by any country where we can put our embassy. What does it gain the Palestinian people for their leaders to throw up roadblocks to negotiations? A peace process that is damaged by the simple recognition that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel is not a peace process. It is a justification for an endless stalemate. The United States has done more than any other country to assist the Palestinian people, by far. Since 1994, we have given over $5 billion to the Palestinians in bilateral economic assistance, security assistance, and humanitarian assistance. Last year, the United States voluntarily funded almost 30% of UNRWA's budget. That's more than the next 2 largest donors combined. And it's vastly more than some of the members of this council that have considerable financial resources of their own. I'll be blunt. When the American people see a group of countries whose total contributions to the Palestinian people is less than 1% of UNRWA's budget, when they see these countries accuse the United States of being insufficiently committed to peace, the American people lose their patience. What we witnessed here today in the Security Council is an insult. It won't be forgotten. It's one more example of the United Nations doing more harm than good in addressing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Today, for the simple act of deciding where to put our embassy, the United States was forced to defend its sovereignty. The record will reflect that we did so proudly. Today, for acknowledging a basic truth about the capital city of Israel, we are accused of harming peace. The record will reflect that we reject that outrageous claim. For these reasons, and with the best interests of both the Israeli and the Palestinian people firmly in mind, the United States votes no on this resolution. Thank you.
Let me just start with this sentence. Gun control is how the government says it doesn't trust you. Gun control is about one thing: control. And I know, yes, November 8th we won, and we've, protected the Supreme Court. And regardless of, how people feel about the President of the United States, Supreme Court, that was a good choice with Gorsuch. But the battle's not done yet. I hope you know that we still have midterms coming up. Midterms in 2018, and if we lose control of the Senate, well, then we could very much fall into seeing something like the UN Arms Trade Treaty ratified, because it's already gone through, it just needs Senate ratification. This is the stuff that we're up against. These are the people, these blue-collar voters, you know why? Do you know why Democrats lost in November? You want to know why they lost? Because these people are worrying about how they're going to put food on their table. They're worried about how they're going to pay their premiums of the health care that they didn't lose yet. They're worried about how they're going to keep their lights on, how they're going to keep their jobs. When you had Hillary Clinton out there saying she was going to ruin the coal industry. These people were worried about being blown up if they decided to go up to the city and go out to the mall, because we have domestic terror incidents. And instead of getting answers from one particular party, instead, they got lectured to about pronouns. They got lectured to about who can use whose bathroom. They got lectured about everything that has nothing to do with the vital necessities of day-to-day life. And that is why Democrats lost. Now by the way, I want to give a shout out to all those blue dog Democrats who went out and swung this election, because they voted guns, they voted jobs, they voted manufacturing, they voted trade. They didn't vote bathrooms and pronouns and Beyonce and everything else. And you know what? Sorry, Democrats, we stole your girl. You know what? I look at it like this. Because of those blue dog Democrats that we stole, actually, they were with the NRA the entire time. The NRA brought them and helped and encouraged them to vote for freedom and made sure, look, this is what is on the ballot. And now, as a result of this, we got Neil Gorsuch knocking at the door. As a result of this, we have real generals making decisions in like the State Department, Pentagon, Department of Defense. These are great decisions. And you're not going to find no bigger tent than what you find at the NRA. You won't. Men, women, black, white, gay, straight, Democrat, Republican. I've talked to so many members that the media with their fake news, that they want to ignore. Y'all want to know what the face of the NRA looks like? All you people back there, because it seems like whenever there's some sort of, shooting or some sort of tragedy, y'all go to some lobbyist who used to work for Monsanto instead of coming and talking to actual gun owners. This here is the face of the NRA. I am a face of the NRA. Maj Touré is a face of the NRA. Chris Chang is a face of the NRA. Pink Pistols are a face of the NRA. Get it right. This is the organization for people who want to have a fighting chance. All day, every day. Now I'm going to tell you something else. This is the organization for women who don't want to be afraid if they stop at the grocery store to get some milk at night after working all day, and they got to get milk and toilet paper for their family, and they got to stop at the grocery store. I don't want to feel afraid walking to my car at night, because you have these lobbyist groups out there who think it's virtuous to be a victim and not virtuous to be an armed defender of yourself and your family. And so the first thing that you need to know about gun control is it's the government telling you it doesn't trust you. It is control, period. In fact, gun control has racial roots. I have a whole entire chapter, everything cited to the nth degree, which is why when any of these people, when any of the Brady campaign, the Moms Demand, any of these Bloomberg groups have ever tried to attack me, they try to attack the cover of the book, they try to attack my appearance, they try to attack the way I talk, or that my family's redneck, or something like that. They never attack the book. It went through two legal reads. The second one, I demanded that it go through, just to make sure everything was covered. It's a left-wing lynching. That's what gun control is. The first federal gun grab was Wounded Knee. And there's an ideology and a party that orchestrated it, but we'll get to that later. That was the first federally backed gun grab. And we've had more in recent time. We saw it after Hurricane Katrina. That was another federally backed gun grab. It is still happening today. And one of the things that gun control advocates want to do is they want to exploit natural disaster. They'll exploit anything that they can so that they can say, we're the government and we're here to help. And we all know what Reagan thought about that.
Let me first say a word about my identity and my background. I am a Jewish, age-enhanced, female-identified person with a gender non-conforming multi-poo named Izzy. Way back in the last century, I was a feminist academic in good standing with my feminist colleagues. I was invited to feminist conferences and asked to review papers for Feminist Philosophy Journal. My courses were cross-listed in women's studies. I never knew quite why, because I wasn't really teaching anything. But I was a woman, and at that time, they assumed I should be counted. That was fine. Well, anyway, that all changed in 1994 when I published a book called Who Sold Feminism. That book was strongly feminist, but I rejected the idea that American women are oppressed. Feminism overall had worked, I said. I mean, there are still problems, but by the 90s, I mean, American women were among the freest, most liberated in the world. And it just didn't make sense to say that women were all that worse off than men. It was a complicated mix of benefits and burdens. But I said to speak of American society as a patriarchy, or to refer to American women as a subjugated class, that was just absurd. So I argued. Well, some prominent feminists actually agreed with what I had to say. I even received some fan mail, but not very much. I was quickly subjected to a colorful array of epithets for my heresies, and many feminist leaders were passionately convinced that the United States is an oppressive patriarchy. They did not appreciate my plea for moderation. I am a strong supporter of old-fashioned equality of opportunity feminism, the kind of feminism that won women great, educational opportunities and, just look at American society. As I said, women are flourishing in unprecedented ways. Equity feminism developed out of the European Enlightenment. It wants for women what it wants for everyone: opportunity, dignity, liberty. Equity feminism has never been popular in the academy. In the late 70s and 80s, many feminist theorists, led by the quite brilliant legal scholar Catherine McKinnon, they came to view our society as a pervasive, all-encompassing male hegemony. And they thought it's not enough to change a few laws. Reform isn't effective. The entire system, they called it the sex-gender system. One feminist scholar referred to the system by which bisexual babies are transformed into gendered human beings, one destined to command, the other to obey. And I remember once reading that to my late husband, and he said, which one commands and which obeys? But anyway, that wasn't a question. But anyway, there's just this very theatrical, exaggerated view of reality, a distorted view of reality. And I just was never able to buy it. I still can't buy it. I can't see the United States as a rigid sex-gender system. It wasn't at the time I wrote my book. It isn't now. And you know what? We have hundreds, maybe thousands of gender scholars, definitely thousands, maybe millions if you include the activists, who do just that. They specialize in persuading themselves and other women that we are victims and men are the privileged. Well, here's the problem. It's just not true that as I said, that men have more privileges. They have different privileges, but they have struggles just as much as women. And in some areas, women are way ahead of men. Take education. That is an institution where women are the privileged sex. At every level of education, from preschool to graduate school, across all ethnic and class lines, women get better grades. They are, winning most of the honors and prizes. They're far more likely to college. Today, women earn a majority of the bachelor's degrees and other advanced degrees. They surpassed men in PhDs. Our schools do a lot better job educating women than men. And according to the Labor Department, there are about 10 million men now in prime working years, 25 to 54, who are out of the labor force altogether, not just unemployed, not seeking to be employed. The economist Larry Summers, former president of Harvard, has looked at the data and concluded that by mid-century, unless things change, about a third of all men in their prime working years, 25 to 54, are going to be out of the workforce. Now, you would think that we might, say, do something about that, but if you bring up male problems, even problems that threaten our workforce and threaten our economy, threaten the social stability of the country, it's called backlash. And the gender scholars just don't talk about it. And she said, like, women, they occasionally will do these jobs, but largely the dangerous and gritty jobs are done by men. Now, is it any surprise that the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that every year 5,000 Americans die in the workplace from accidents, 92% men? So we hear all about the Fortune 500 CEOs, but what about the unfortunate 4,600 men who are, dead? It's just that it's not brought up. The point that I'm making is they oversimplify. Take something like the vulnerability to violence. It's absolutely true that women are more vulnerable to sexual assault. It's a horrible, rape is a horrible crime, as I'm sure everyone in this room agrees. But when it comes to overall violence and being murdered or being beaten up, men are far more vulnerable than women. They're far more likely to be victims of murder. But I've looked at so many studies for so long that make these extravagant claims about the oppression of women that I now approach them with a lot of skepticism. But I try to be open-minded. But as I said, modern life is a complicated mix of burdens and benefits for each sex. And I think men and women enjoy distinctive advantages and face distinctive challenges. We can do better for both men and women.